Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'll be going over the latest update to my Blender add-on ReFace version 2.0.4. For this video, I'll be focusing specifically on the corner guided grid refill operator, which is one of the biggest additions introduced in ReFace 2.0. I'll be making a separate video covering the rest of the major changes and improvements in ReFace, but for now, I want to give this operator its own dedicated breakdown. You can access ReFace either through the right-click context menu or using ReFace's dedicated shortcut using Ctrl-Shift-V. Just an FYI, this shortcut can be changed from the add-ons preferences menu. To use the operator, you will need to be in face mode and have a closed patch of faces selected. We will tackle patches that form a continuous loop or patches with holes later in the video. Once you have a valid patch selected, you can call the operator. First thing you'll notice is that there is a floating widget that follows the mouse and a shortcuts widget in the bottom right corner. You can configure the position, size, and color of the shortcuts widget from the add-ons preferences menu. There are several modes in the operator, which are the corner verts mode, locked verts mode, locked edge mode, split face areas, face split lines mode, focus mode, and smoothing mode. The operator starts in the corner verts mode. In this mode, you will need to define 3 to 4 corner vertices on the boundary edge that will define the corners of your patch. Before proceeding further, we can use P to toggle the preview. This enables us to see how the final retopologized mesh will look like. Depending on where we define our corner vertices, the solution will change. At any time, we can click on a corner vertex to remove it and assign it somewhere else. Keep in mind that to see the preview mesh, we need to have 3 to 4 corner vertices defined. We can use our smoothing mode, which is enabled using R to smooth out our final mesh. Once enabled, we can move our mouse right to left or left to right to increase or decrease smoothing. Once we are happy with the result, you can click R or the left mouse button to confirm the smoothing. Keep in mind that this can get a little bit laggy for larger and more complicated patches. Once we are happy with the result, we can click Enter to confirm the operator. Once confirmed, in our redo menu, we have view handy options that we can play around with. One of which is the smoothing factor. In certain cases, the normals can be flipped, so we can use auto recalculate normals to fix that. We can also control the edge count both horizontally and vertically for simple rectangular patches. In our next example, we can use the shortcut S automatically detect the corners of our patch. This works best for rectangular patches. For our next mode, which is the locked vertex mode, which is enabled using V, in this mode we can define vertices that the operator will preserve. These vertices can be existing vertices on the boundary edge or vertices that we can create by clicking anywhere on the boundary edge. Locked vertices based on existing boundary vertices are light blue, while locked vertices created by clicking anywhere on the boundary edge are dark blue. At any point, we can always use the delete button to remove all existing vertices. So if I go back to C mode and press delete, it removes all the corner vertices. I can press S again and in the locked vertex mode to select sharp corner vertices automatically. Next, we have the lock edge mode. This mode allows us to maintain the flow from a neighboring edge by locking its vertices. Let's take this patch over here. I've already went ahead and retopologized this patch. I can use S to automatically select corner vertices. As you can see, the edges do not match with the neighboring patch. I can go into locked edge mode and I can select this edge to lock it. Keep in mind that this works best for simple patches that don't have face splits. But there are ways around it for when our patches get more complicated, as we will see. Next, we have the most important mode in this operator, which is the face split areas mode. This mode allows us to segment larger and more complicated patches into simpler rectangular patches, which the operator can then stitch together. To enter this mode, we need to have 4 corner vertices defined, then we can access it using A. We can define face splits clicking anywhere on the boundary edge. This will define the starting point of our edge, then click anywhere on either an adjacent or opposite boundary edge. This will define the endpoint of our face split edge. Once defined, the operator will auto-determine the corner vertices of these individual sub-islands. We can inspect each sub-island using focus mode, which can be accessed using F. Once in focus mode, we can traverse the sub-islands using the left and right arrows. Each sub-island has its own corner vertices. We can click on any of them to remove them and assign them anywhere else that fits better. Keep in mind that sub-islands that share corner vertices with the main global corner vertices cannot be removed. Back in A mode, we can click anywhere on a face split edge to add a spline point for finer control over our island boundaries and shape. If we double click on a spline point, we can convert it to a hard point, which slightly changes the behavior of how the face split edges affect the topology. Keep in mind that spline points that are marked as hard points can be defined as locked vertices. This gives you finer control over where you'd like to ensure there are vertices within the mesh itself. We will see later how this can be useful. To turn a spline point back into a normal point, we can just double click on it again. To remove a spline point, we can click on it, which will make it active, as you can see by the white outline, then clicking the delete button. If there are no spline points selected, all existing face split edges will be removed. We can use Control to snap spline points onto existing vertices in the original patch. If we smooth out our mesh, you will notice that we will lose our sharp edge at the bottom of the patch. We can mark face split edges as sharp, which will prevent them from being smoothed out. We can do this using our last mode, which is face split lines mode. This mode essentially lets you traverse the face split edges. We can access this mode using Q. We can mark our active edge as sharp using M. Once marked, you will notice that it is no longer affected by smoothing. Back in our example here, defining face split edges manually can get a little bit tedious, which is why we have a handy function in A mode using I called import sharp edges. To use this, we need to mark any edges that we want to maintain as sharp before calling the operator. It is important to ensure that all sharp edges are continuous and start and end at the boundary. Any edges that do not follow that will be ignored. We have another example here where we have this sharp edge that we would like to maintain. We can use S to auto determine the corner vertices, enable the preview, use import sharp edges, and then you can see the result over here. We can increase or decrease the smoothing depending on what's the best result. If we go into focus mode, you will see that we can swap out this corner vertex over here, and that gives us a different result. Now, to better showcase the capabilities of face split areas, I have this patch over here. It has a lot of notches, and if we use our conventional tools such as locked vertices, the solution will not be the best. If I enable the preview, it is not following these notches over here. It's not maintaining them. And if I enable lock vertex mode and I lock all these vertices, it's only getting worse. We can enable face split mode, click anywhere on boundary vertices, and I can continue creating those face splits. And slowly the patch is following the boundaries of our original selection. You can see that the result is so much better than just using locked vertices. We have this example over here to show you the value of importing sharp edges. I've already went ahead and marked all these edges as sharp. If I call the operator, define our 4 corner vertices, it is following the original patch. However, that can get better if I go into face split areas mode and import the sharp edges. If you do want to maintain these bevels or these vertices, what we can do is go into locked vertex mode. Now I went ahead and locked all these vertices, and here is our final result. We can also use the operator on selections that form continuous loops, such as this radio antenna over here. When using the continuous loop solver, we do not need to define any corners. We can just enable the preview right away. We are already getting a solution. Now you can see this is not so good up here. If we go into A mode and then import our sharp edges, you can see that this is getting significantly better. You can also use R to smooth out a little bit of these irregularities up here. Finally, we can use the operator on patches that contain holes of any shape. If you are using the hole solver, you will need to define 4 corner vertices. We can use face split edges to segment this patch into 2 segments. A segment that uses the normal solver and a segment that uses the hole or continuous loop solver. Finally, I want to introduce two experimental features that I'm currently working on. These can be enabled in the Preferences menu. These are the Display mode and the Dynamic Edges mode. For the display mode, I have this simple patch over here. If I click D, we have this new view where we can see the number of edges on each sub-island. If I select any of these islands, I can click on these number indicators. I can scroll up and down to control the number of edges per island, which gives you finer control over the density per sub-island. If I change this edge density over here, it affects all these sub-islands since these edges flow through all these sub-islands. Now this is still experimental, so in more complicated patches, this is not guaranteed to work yet. For our next experimental feature, which are dynamic edges. As you can see, I have this large patch over here. First thoughts, you would think that there is no way we can use the tools that I just showed you to resolve this patch. If I go ahead, call the operator, define arbitrarily my four corner vertices, enable the preview mode, this is an absolute mess and absolutely unusable. If I disable the preview mode for a second, I can import our sharp edges. We have created face splits along all the edges that I marked as sharp. If I go into F mode and I inspect each sub-island, first things first, this sub-island is missing two corner vertices. So if I just mark these, everything else looks well. I can enable the preview mode again. We are not even getting a solution. So let's try to segment this even further and see what we can get. This is where the first part of dynamic edges comes up. Generally, face split edges are only drawn between two boundary vertices or edges. However, dynamic edges have no limitation. I can define a face split edge between a boundary edge and another face split edge. Now, if I go into F mode and then my sub islands, you will see that we have a new sub island that has been added. If I enable the preview mode, now we are getting some sort of solution. It is still not quite the best, so we can refine this even further using dynamic edges. The next thing we can do is define edges that go from this face split edge to this corner over here. If I disable the preview so that the operator is much smoother, while in A mode, I can press J to enable split to split mode. Now, split to split mode enables you to draw a face split edge between two existing face split edges. I can click anywhere on the first face split edge and anywhere on the second face split edge. I have added a face split edge that goes between those two face split edges. I can also add another face split edge over here. However, I do need to disable split to split mode because this is a boundary edge. I can click here and then click over here, and now we have added another edge. Let's do that down here as well. We'll enable split to split mode as well. Click on this spline point, click over here, disable once again, click on this boundary vertex, and then click over here. Now, before we do anything, let's go into our focus mode. We will just traverse each sub-island to make sure that they all have their corner vertices, and they do. Let's enable the preview mode and see what is happening. And we do not have a solution. So let's try to break this down even further. Let's add a cut to segment this part over here. We can enable our split to split mode and then just add splits all around here. We enable our preview once again. And there you go. The solution is significantly better. It is a little bit uneven over here, but we can refine and fix that even further. However, the solution is significantly better and could not be achieved without our dynamic edges. Now we can go ahead and add face split edges between all these points. Make sure our J mode is enabled. I went ahead and added face split edges between all these points. Our topology is slowly looking better. If we do the same thing down here, we can define face split edges between all these points. And there you go. Look at this. Our edge flow is much cleaner, Now, I can add some smoothing to this since the final mesh looks a little bit uneven. So let's go ahead and do that. We can also see that this vertex over here is not preserved, so we can simply use our locked vertex mode to ensure that it is. And there you go. There is a little bit of overlap over here, but nothing that cannot be fixed manually. However, for the sake of this demonstration, I think we have a pretty good result. Now, let's look again. Can get a little bit complicated. However, the results are definitely worth it. That's all I have for you today. I hope this demonstration gives you a clear example of the corner guided grid refill operator. If you have any questions about the operator or you would like more demonstrations, please let me know and I'll be happy to make more videos. If you are interested, the add-on is available on Superhive and Gumroad. Be sure to subscribe, like this video if you found it useful, and leave a comment to let me know what you think. Thank you and have a good day.